April 11th, 1866, 9 o'clock in the evening. Rain cascaded down the grimy windows of 28 Cannon Street, in the very heart of Victorian London's commercial district. The street was nearly deserted, save for the occasional hansom cab splashing through puddles, its wheels clattering on wet cobblestones. Gas lamps struggled against the downpour, casting wavering light on the brass nameplate of Messrs. Bevington, leather sellers and merchants, a firm that had stood proud since 1702. Inside the 4-storey building, Sarah Millson sat by the fire with another servant, Elizabeth Lowes, drinking tea from delicate china cups. The two women had settled in for a quiet evening, the leather goods showroom below locked and shuttered, the warehouse inventory secured. Sarah, at 59, had been housekeeper here for 7 years. She knew every creak of the floorboards, every draught from the windows. She knew her routine, except tonight would be different. Chapter 1. The Fatal Visitor. That rainy April evening began like any other. The clock on the mantelpiece chimed 9, its brass pendulum swinging methodically. Sarah had just finished mending one of Elizabeth's aprons, a small tear in the hem that had bothered the younger woman all day. She set aside her needle and thread, flexing her fingers against the evening chill. The fire crackled, rain pattered against the windows. Elizabeth poured another cup of tea, and then it came, the sharp ring of the street bell cutting through the cosy domestic scene like a knife. Sarah set down her cup, a curious expression crossing her face. She glanced at the grandfather clock again, as if checking she'd heard correctly. In all her years at Bevington's, she'd never had a visitor at this hour during such a downpour. But something in her demeanour shifted, from puzzlement to recognition. "I know who it is," she said to Elizabeth, rising from her chair and straightening her collar. Those would be among the last words Sarah Millson ever spoke. Sarah took up a candle holder from the mantel, the gas lights in the stairwell were always dim to save expense, and made her way to the door. Her footsteps echoed in the empty building. Down the servants' stairs she went, past the offices where Mr. Bevington conducted his business, past the showroom with its displays of fine leather goods, to the street entrance. Elizabeth remained by the fire, unconcerned. Sarah often received tradespeople or delivery boys at odd hours. Minutes passed. 10, 20. The fire crackled. The rain continued its assault on the windows. When an hour had passed and Sarah hadn't returned, Elizabeth began to feel uneasy. She called down the stairs, her voice tentative at first, then more urgent. No answer came back except the echo of her own words. "Mrs. Millson, Sarah." Lighting her own candle, Elizabeth began to descend. The stairwell seemed darker than usual, the shadows deeper. She called again, her voice trembling slightly. And then she saw it. At the bottom of the stairs, sprawled across the black and white checkered tiles of the entrance hall, lay Sarah Millson. A pool of dark blood was spreading beneath her head, soaking into the grout between the tiles. The candle she'd carried lay broken nearby, wax congealing on the floor, and blood. There was so much blood still flowing from deep wounds to her skull. Elizabeth screamed. Chapter 2. A scene of peculiar details. When Inspector James Harvey arrived at 28 Cannon Street an hour later, he'd already heard murmurs from the constables about something odd at the scene. As a veteran of the City of London Police with 20 years' experience, Harvey prided himself on having seen everything. But this was different. The body itself was brutal but not unusual. Multiple blows to the head with what appeared to be a blunt instrument. But it was the details surrounding the body that made Harvey pause. Sarah's shoes, black leather, well worn but polished, had been removed and placed with almost ceremonial care on the hall table. They sat side by side, perfectly aligned, as if she'd taken them off for a nap. There wasn't a drop of blood on them. "Why would a killer take time to arrange his victim's footwear?" Harvey muttered, making notes in his pocketbook. The murder weapon appeared to be a small crowbar, the kind used to open packing cases in the warehouse. One lay near the body, strangely clean of blood. Another was missing from its usual place in the storeroom, but perhaps strangest of all was the gaslight. According to Elizabeth, Sarah always lit it at 8 o'clock sharp. It was her routine, as regular as breathing. But now it was extinguished, though not turned off at the meter. Someone had deliberately snuffed it out. And then there were Sarah's keys. Scattered on the stairs like dropped tears, they spoke of struggle or surprise. As Harvey continued his examination, Elizabeth provided her account, her voice shaking. She told of the doorbell, Sarah's odd comment about knowing who it was, the hour of waiting, and then that terrible discovery. But there was one more detail that made Harvey's blood run cold. When Elizabeth had opened the door to seek help, she found a woman standing on the doorstep, seemingly waiting. A woman in a dark cloak, rain dripping from her hood. "Please," Elizabeth had begged, "there's been a murder." "Help." The woman's response would haunt the investigation. "Oh dear, no, I can't come in." And with that, she had vanished into the rain-soaked night, leaving only questions behind. Chapter 3. Secrets of the Victim. As dawn broke over London, Inspector Harvey began digging into Sarah Millson's life. What he discovered would transform a simple murder investigation into something far more complex. On the surface, Sarah appeared the very model of Victorian respectability. She attended church regularly, kept meticulous household accounts, and was well regarded by her employers. The Bevington family spoke of her with genuine fondness. But beneath this respectable facade lay shadows. Sarah had been born Sarah Bennett in 1807, the daughter of a shopkeeper. She'd married young, too young perhaps, to Thomas Millson, a charming but unreliable man who eventually abandoned her. In an era when divorce was nearly impossible and desertion left women in legal limbo, Sarah found herself trapped. Unable to remarry legally, yet desperate for security in a society that offered few options to single women, Sarah had made a fateful decision. She entered into a second marriage, bigamous in the eyes of the law but providing her with a new identity and social standing. This secret would be her undoing. Someone had discovered her past, someone had used it to exploit her, and that someone might have killed her to keep her quiet. Chapter 4. The investigation begins. City of London police launched their investigation with all the resources at their disposal. Detective Sergeant William Palmer joined Harvey, bringing his expertise in financial crimes. Within days, they had uncovered Sarah's secret and identified the man who'd been exploiting it. The leather goods warehouse became a hive of activity. Police constables searched every corner, dusted surfaces for fingerprints, though the technique was still experimental, and interviewed staff and neighbours. The Bevington family, anxious about their reputation, pressured for a swift resolution. Harvey's team discovered financial records in Sarah's room, a careful accounting of payments made over months, always to the same person. They found letters, unsigned, demanding money and threatening exposure. And they found witnesses who recalled seeing a particular man visiting Sarah, always coming after dark, always leaving with something hidden under his coat. The pattern was clear: blackmail. Systematic, calculated blackmail that had drained Sarah's modest savings and left her vulnerable. Chapter 5. The Suspect. William Smith. William Bill. Smith was exactly what Victorian society feared: a gentleman gone bad. Son of an Eton schoolmaster, educated at one of England's finest schools, he'd had every advantage. But gambling debts and a taste for expensive living had led him down a darker path. By 1866, Smith was known to police as a confidence man and blackmailer. He moved easily through society, his education and bearing opening doors that would have been closed to common criminals. He had a gift for discovering secrets and an appetite for exploiting them. When Harvey's investigation pointed to Smith, the pieces seemed to fall into place. He had motive. Sarah's bigamy provided perfect leverage for blackmail. He had opportunity. Witnesses placed him in London that night. And he had means. At 6 feet tall and athletically built, he was certainly capable of overpowering an older woman. But proving it would be another matter entirely. Chapter 6. Investigation Challenges. The investigation into Sarah Millson's murder exposed the limitations of Victorian policing. Harvey and his team faced obstacles that would seem insurmountable by modern standards. Forensic science in 1866 was primitive. Blood typing didn't exist. Fingerprinting was experimental and not admissible in court. Crime scene photography was rare and unreliable. Police had to rely on observation, witness testimony, and traditional detective work. The social structures of the era created additional challenges. Sarah's bigamy scandal threatened to overshadow the murder investigation itself. The Bevington family, pillars of the community, wanted the matter resolved quickly and quietly to protect their reputation. Witnesses proved unreliable. Memories shifted under questioning. Stories changed. and the mysterious woman on the doorstep remained frustratingly unidentified despite extensive searches and newspaper appeals. Weather complicated matters further. The heavy rain on the night of the murder had washed away potential evidence outside. Boot prints in the mud, blood trails, any trace the killer might have left. All were gone. And then there was the problem of jurisdiction. The City of London police had authority within the square mile of the financial district, but their powers were limited beyond those boundaries. Smith's residence in Slough required careful coordination with local authorities. Chapter 7: Key Evidence Analysis. As the investigation progressed, detectives focused on several key pieces of evidence. The first breakthrough came when police searched Smith's lodgings in Slough and discovered clothing with what appeared to be bloodstains. In Victorian England, blood analysis was rudimentary at best. Police consulted with eminent physicians and chemists, seeking ways to prove the stains were human blood and possibly link them to the victim. Tests involving microscopes and chemical reagents were conducted, though their reliability was questionable. More promising was the discovery of financial records showing Smith's desperate need for money. Gambling debts, threatening letters from creditors, and a lifestyle far beyond his means all painted a picture of a man under pressure. The most damning evidence came from an unlikely source. A pawnbroker identified Smith as having sold items matching Sarah's description: a locket, some silver spoons, a cameo ring. When confronted, the pawnbroker admitted he'd been threatened into silence, but his conscience had finally forced him to speak. Yet each piece of evidence brought new questions. If the clothing bore Sarah's blood, why were there no traces at the crime scene? If Smith had taken items to pawn, why weren't they missing from her room? Chapter 8: Expert Perspectives. The Cannon Street murder attracted attention from some of Victorian London's foremost experts. Dr. Alfred Swain Taylor, pioneer of forensic toxicology, consulted on the case. Though blood analysis was beyond the era's capabilities, Taylor's expertise in detecting poisons helped establish that Sarah hadn't been drugged before her death. Medical jurisprudence was the emerging field, and the unusual aspects of the case drew academic interest. Dr. Henry Letherby, a leading authority on medical evidence, examined the crime scene and provided insights into the killer's possible medical knowledge or experience. Legal experts debated the admissibility of evidence gathered in the investigation. Victorian law was evolving, and cases like this helped establish precedents that would shape the future of criminal prosecution. The psychological aspects of the crime fascinated alienists, the Victorian term for psychiatrists. The deliberate extinguishing of the gaslight, the removal of shoes, the apparent familiarity between victim and killer, all suggested a complex psychological dynamic that went beyond simple murder for gain. Chapter 9: Psychological Analysis. What kind of mind commits such a crime? Victorian alienists struggled to understand the psychology behind the Cannon Street murder. The calculated planning evident in the crime scene arrangement contrasted sharply with the apparent passion of the attack itself. The removal of Sarah's shoes became a particular focus of psychological speculation. Some suggested religious significance, removing shoes as a sign of sanctity or respect. Others saw it as a sign of intimacy, perhaps indicating a relationship closer than mere blackmail. The extinguished gaslight spoke to premeditation. Someone who knew the building, knew the routines, knew that darkness would provide cover. This wasn't a random attack, but a carefully planned execution. Most puzzling was Sarah's apparent recognition of her killer. "I know who it is," suggested not fear, but familiarity. Had she expected this visit? Was she meeting someone she trusted, only to be betrayed? Chapter 10: Narrative Twist Revelation. Just as the case against Smith seemed ironclad, the investigation took an unexpected turn. A witness came forward claiming to have seen a different man leaving 28 Cannon Street that night. Someone who matched Smith in height and build but wore the distinctive uniform of a railway worker. This revelation sent detectives scrambling. Could there be two suspects? Was Smith being framed? Or had the witness, like so many others, fallen victim to the unreliable nature of memory under pressure? The confusion deepened when a second confession emerged. William Henry Hall, a 22-year-old painter, walked into a police station claiming responsibility for the murder. But his story, when examined, fell apart under questioning. He knew none of the details that only the killer would know, and his confession appeared to be the ramblings of a disturbed mind seeking notoriety. Yet this bizarre interruption only added to the mystery. Why would someone confess to a crime they hadn't committed? What hidden motives lurked beneath this facade? Chapter 11. Legal Proceedings. The trial of William Smith at the Old Bailey in June 1866 became the sensation of the season. Newspaper coverage was extensive, with artists sketching courtroom scenes for the illustrated papers. Public galleries filled hours before proceedings began. Smith's defence team was formidable. They'd assembled some of the era's finest legal minds, determined to challenge every aspect of the prosecution's case. Their strategy was masterful: present an alternative narrative, undermine the evidence, and provide an unbreakable alibi. The prosecution opened with confidence, laying out the motive of blackmail, the financial pressure Smith faced, and what they believed was physical evidence linking him to the crime. "Gentlemen of the jury," the prosecutor declared, "we shall prove that William Smith, driven by desperation and greed, committed this heinous act to silence his victim forever." But the defence had prepared well. They produced witness after witness, 11 in total, who swore Smith had been playing cards at a private club in Slough throughout the evening of the murder. These weren't casual acquaintances, but respected members of the community, including a magistrate and a banker. The blood evidence, so carefully preserved, faced devastating scrutiny. When examined by Dr. Letherby, now testifying for the defence, the stains proved to be something entirely different. Cogging, a reddish material used in hat making that Smith had handled in his recent work at a haberdashery. Most damaging was the revelation that the prosecution's key witness, who claimed to have seen Smith at the scene, had been assisted by police in making her identification. Under cross-examination, she admitted to viewing Smith in custody before the lineup, effectively contaminating her testimony. Chapter 12. Resolution and Impact. After mere hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict: not guilty. The foreman's voice rang clear in the hushed courtroom. Smith's shoulders sagged with relief. His family wept. And Baron Bramwell, the presiding judge, made a statement that would echo through legal history. It is due to the prisoner to say he leaves this court without a stain upon his character. But the acquittal left more questions than answers. If Smith hadn't killed Sarah Millson, who had? The police, embarrassed by their failures and the exposed coaching of witnesses, quietly abandoned active investigation. The case had lasting impacts. It led to reforms in police procedure, particularly regarding witness identification. It highlighted the need for more scientific approaches to evidence gathering, and it demonstrated the growing sophistication of criminal defence in the courts. But for Sarah Millson's family and friends, justice remained elusive. Chapter 13. Epilogue. Current status. Today, 28 Cannon Street has long since been demolished, replaced by steel and glass towers of modern commerce. The Bevington leather business, which survived for another century, finally closed in the 1960s. But the mystery endures. The National Archives at Kew preserves the case file, MEPO 3/81, for researchers who still seek answers. Historians debate the evidence, propose new theories, and wonder about the strange details that made this case unique. The mysterious woman on the doorstep remains unidentified. The significance of the removed shoes continues to puzzle. And somewhere in the shadows of history, a killer escaped justice. In death, Sarah Millson became more famous than she ever was in life. Her story serves as a reminder that beneath the ordered facade of Victorian society lurked secrets, violence, and mysteries that defy explanation even 157 years later. As London traffic rushes past where 28 Cannon Street once stood, few pause to remember the quiet housekeeper who died there one rainy April night. But for those who know the story, the questions remain: who killed Sarah Millson? And why did they leave behind such a puzzling crime scene? The Cannon Street murder, a Victorian mystery that proves some secrets are buried too deep to ever be fully uncovered. If you liked this story, subscribe for more Victorian mysteries and true crime cases that continue to captivate us across the centuries.